Hi folks, how you doing? This is Iqbal. AMD earnings is due this week and this can impact Nvidia's stock price movement. So in this video, I will present the price projections for AMD and that should be good for after earnings. I'm going to use financials, forward PE and correlation analysis for this price projection. And this analysis will also help us understand the impact on Nvidia stock price movement after AMD earnings. Now, let's get started. On your screen, I put together the summary of the financial data for AMD for last 7 quarters. And also, I added the year over year comparison and the quarter over quarter comparison in column J and column K. And also I added the expected numbers for this quarter. So I have the revenue estimate and the EPS estimate. But I do not have the other estimate at this point, so I kept those cells blank. But this should give us some understanding how AMD performed in each quarter. For example, the revenue side on a quarter over quarter basis, the last quarter versus one quarter prior, AMD went up about 6.6% on the revenue sector. In the year over year, the revenue went up about 8.8%. So on both sides, positive upside on the revenue. The net income, quarter over quarter, last quarter versus one quarter prior, the net income went up about 115%. And similar situation, you see the year over year, it went up about 880%. And that's tell the growth in the net income is tremendous. And also, similarly, you see the profit margin percentage, EBIT DA margin percentage, and also the EPS, all positive growth quarter over quarter and year over year. And the free cash flow per share also went up quarter over quarter and year over year. And debt to equity ratio went down. So in all of these areas, AMD has shown a very good improvement both quarter over quarter and year over year. And also for this quarter, the expected numbers for revenue is 6.71, and that's a 15% growth from last quarter versus this quarter. So if AMD is able to meet that, I think that will be a very good sign for AMD. And also EPS, the estimate is 0.92 versus the last quarter 0.69. So let's take a look how much percentage increase in the this quarter expectation versus the last quarter actuals. So that's about 33% increase. And that looks too big compared with the quarter over quarter and year over year numbers for the EPS. So in my opinion, if AMD is able to meet or even beat the expectation, then that will also send a positive message to Nvidia as well. Because historically speaking, quarter over quarter and year over year, the growth has not been that high in just one quarter versus next quarter. Now let's take a further look on the EPS. You see the last quarter, the percentage surprise was about 2%, but historically speaking, in the last 6 quarters, AMD has shown a positive earnings surprise. And also for next 4 quarters, you see that the earnings is expected to grow. And also, if you take a look, the percentage growth increase from this quarter versus 4 quarters from now, and that is Q3 2024 versus Q2 2025, that gives 35% earnings growth in 4 quarters. And that's a tremendous growth. On average, each quarter that tells about 9% earnings growth. And that's not bad. Now let's take a look forward P for AMD and try to make some price projections. So in this table, I updated the adjusted closing price for AMD for about last 4 weeks. And I also updated the P ratio with respect to the trailing 12 months EPS and also P ratio with respect to the forward EPS. You take a look at this line. So You see that EPS is going up and EPS forward is also going up compared with the last quarter. So now I have another table. Here I have captured the trailing P and the forward P for last 13 quarters. And also based on the earnings estimate, I updated the forward P for this quarter, right? And also the third table gives us the EPS projections and the EPS actuals for last 13 quarters as well. I also updated the latest closing price. And also for next 4 quarters, I also have the EPS projections. So I'm using the expected EPS projected number, that is 0.92 for this quarter, to calculate the forward P on 10/26, and that gives 35.27. Another table I have here is basically median, min, average, and the maximum for the forward PE for last 6 quarters. And also I have the earnings surprise for last 13 quarters as well, you see. But in calculating the minimum, average, maximum, and the median earnings surprise, I'm just using last 6 quarters, because that looks to me more relevant. So using those data, I was able to calculate the price projections for AMD, and that's in this table. For the minimum, I came up 137.17. Formula I'm using is the EPS forward, that is H4. You see the first factor, H4 here, and the second factor, S31, that is the forward P minimum value. So the third factor, you see that the earnings surprise, that is S38, but I'm using the minimum value as 0 because I'm assuming that AMD at least should be able to meet the earnings when calculating the minimum expected price. Average, same formula, except the fact instead of using the minimum value, I'm using the average value for the forward P and also earnings surprise. And that gives me 169.64 average value. And similarly for the maximum, same 3 factors. So instead of using the average value for the forward P, I'm using the maximum. And also for the third factor, I'm also using the maximum value. So that gives me the maximum price for AMD, 198.98. So at this point, AMD is trading around 157. And also remember, this price projection that I did should be valid after earnings and should be valid for next 3 months after earnings. Now let's see how good my price projection was in the last quarter. Let me show you. So now I'm showing you a different file. I did this price projection sometime end of August. So my price range was minimum 120 and the maximum 173.9. And let's take a look how AMD performed in this quarter. So in this table, I'm showing you AMD price history for last 3 months. So you see that starting from 28th July through 24 October. And if I calculate the maximum for last 3 months, that gives 174 and the minimum 121.82. And what was my price projection? Let me show you one more time. And this was this. So I was pretty close, right? 120.02 minimum value for my price projection. And what actually happened? 121.82. And the maximum value that I projected 2 months back was 173.9. The maximum that actually came 174.05. So pretty damn close. So last quarter price projections, I did a good job. Let's see how good my job is this time, and the time will tell how good was my analysis. But in terms of the impact on the Nvidia stock price, I think that if AMD is able to beat the earning expectation and also the revenue estimate, then that would give a positive signal to Nvidia as well. And Nvidia price should also go up after AMD earnings report. The reason why I'm saying because the EPS projected is more than 30%, from prior quarter versus this quarter estimate. It was never the case before, And also, the revenue estimate is about 15% up in terms of the estimate versus historically speaking was about 7 or 8%. So now the question becomes, can AMD be able to beat the earnings? Historically speaking, they were able to do that. You see that with the exception of just one quarter in the last 6 or 7 quarters, they did it. But their earnings surprise is not so great, right? About 3 to 4% on average. So if they are able to do the earnings surprise about 3 or 4%, I think market would consider a very good sign. Unlike Nvidia, where we see the earnings surprise more than 8% or 9% each quarter. So that is one more reason for me to keep holding Nvidia stock. And that's probably another reason for me to keep holding Nvidia stocks. And this week's earning should help Nvidia go further up. And that's my assessment. So that was all about my price projections for AMD and the impact on Nvidia stock price after earnings. I hope you liked this video, and also I uploaded my Excel sheet that I showed in this video onto my Patreon account. So if you are an exclusive member, you can access these spreadsheets from there. Thank you so much for watching this video. Talk to you more in the next video. Take care.